So I want to start on something, not the presidential campaign, something that the jerk-offs at CNN, MSNBC, the Washington Post, the New York Times, none of them are going to cover it. So I don't call this the United States of America. I call this the United Corporations of America. And as part of that, we basically have sociopaths running the country pretty much in every sector, in the government, in academia, in the corporations, in the think tanks, basically sociopaths that are so out of touch, and deliberately so. They are deliberately out of touch. So sometimes, very rarely, very, very rarely am I surprised by corruption. I've seen it. I've pretty much seen just about anything. But there are some headlines that are so absolutely shocking that you have to look twice. You have to look 3 times. You have to look 10 times. And when I saw this headline, I just couldn't believe it. Former Michigan Governor Rick Snyder is named a Harvard University Fellow. A former Michigan governor who's been criticized for his administration's role in the Flint water crisis is headed to Harvard University to teach and study subjects related to state and local government. Harvard's John F. Kennedy School of Government announced Friday that Rick Snyder begins a work as a senior research fellow Monday, meaning today. His fellowship is with the school's Taubman Center for State and Local Government. Center Director Jeffrey Liebman says in a statement, the 2-term Republican governor brings, quote, expertise in management, public policy, and promoting civility. I just want to have a collective moment of silence for our basic humanity, because now it's out the door. Can you join me in that moment of silence? I thought, honestly, I thought that this was The Onion when I saw this. I really thought this was I'm not kidding. I thought it was The Onion when I saw this on Twitter. I want to be clear. I was not poisoned. I'm a white dude. But I've been to Flint 14 times since 2016. Jen, Status Quo's co-founder, who's in the Super Chat now, this is a Super Chat, has been there, I think, 4 or 5 times, Jen. Ty has been there probably 10 times. So between us all, we've been there quite a lot. Governor Rick Snyder, and for those of you that are not aware, recently all of the remaining criminal charges related to the Flint water crisis were dropped. I, of course, reported on that and did a video. And I can't get into details, but based on the sources I have, I believe that a big reason they were dropped is potentially to go after Governor Rick Snyder. I believe that based on the sources that I have, I can't go into such detail, I believe that the highest level officials that were being charged, that is Nick Lyon, the Director of Health and Human Services for the the Director of the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, I believe that essentially in order to get information from him that would lead to the Attorney General's office being able to prosecute Governor Snyder, I believe that to get that information from him and some others that they dropped the charges, I believe they dropped the charges as a result. I don't have any confirmation. This is just my belief. I'm not giving you any, concrete reporting, just based on a source that I have. And this source has been very right the majority of the time they've given me information. So, putting that aside, Rick Snyder, let's take this statement. Let's take this statement literally for what they said and go through it line by line. Expertise in management. Expertise in management. Governor Rick Snyder appointed unelected emergency managers. You want to talk about the threat of the Russian boogeyman to our democracy? This governor appointed unelected emergency managers, essentially hijacking democracy from Flint, Michigan, which is 42% poverty. He stripped democracy away from Flint, Michigan. So he put in his own little stooge for emergency managers in Flint. And these are the men who decided what a good idea it would be. While we're trying to privatize the water system, let's switch to the Flint River, which had General Motors dumping its waste products in it for a century, which had dead bodies floating around, which if you look at it, look green from street level. And let's not put in the Department of Environmental Quality. Let's try to save some money. So we're not going to put in the proper corrosion control chemicals into the water so we could save money. So this governor, who apparently Harvard says is an expert on management and public policy and promoting civility, this governor appointed unelected emergency managers who together poisoned an impoverished majority-minority community. Yeah, he's got some expertise in poisoning poor people. This governor not only poisoned these people, not only perjured himself in front of Congress. For those of you that don't know, this governor went in front of Congress in 2016 and he claimed, I didn't know a thing about the Flint water problem or the lead problem or the Legionella problem until recently. His own state-appointed employee, who he appointed to be the first responder to the Flint water crisis, testified under oath. Governor Rick Snyder knew months before he told Congress about the Legionella threat, which killed, on paper, 12 people, but PBS reported it could be up to 120 people that died from Legionella in Flint. He knew months before he said he knew. That's perjuring himself in front of Congress. But, white, powerful people in this country, they could do whatever they want, right? There's 3 legal systems. The first one is for rich, powerful white dudes. The second one is for, what's left of the middle class, you and I. And the third one is for black, brown, and indigenous people. So this guy lied to Congress, lied to state investigators. He not only, you want to talk about civility? Harvard, Detroit Free Press, this Harvard guy says, and promoting civility. This governor was trying to shut down the free water distribution stations around Flint pretty much from the moment he opened it. This governor defied a court order from a judge to deliver bottled water home to home in Flint. He was mandated by a judge to do this. Refused. This governor perjured himself in front of Congress, lied about when he knew about the Flint water crisis, and then this governor, do you know how much the residents of Michigan, including Flint, have paid out of their taxpayer dollars for this governor and his state officials for their criminal defense? Nearly $30 million. This governor told the black mayor of Flint, do you want to talk about civility? He told the black mayor of Flint, get over it already. I mean, this is no surprise. Harvard, Rick Snyder is just a dime a dozen. Just look at this from last year. Harvard has 2 years ago, has a nice conversation with war criminal Henry Kissinger. This is who excels at Harvard. This is who gets fellowships at Harvard. People who poison poor communities, people who start wars under false pretenses. I'm sure pretty soon they'll invite Dick Cheney for tea. I'm sure Donald Trump, when he's not president, will become a fellow at Harvard. And I usually don't get this crazy, but in the world kind of country do we live in when people, by the way, there's still a very likely chance that this governor that Harvard University just hired as a fellow could be criminally prosecuted. I'm just telling you based on the sources that I have. He's not out of the water yet, no pun intended. And if you need any reminder what this governor allowed to happen when he knew what was going on, the water was switched on April 25th, 2014. The residents started complaining immediately of brown water, of rashes, of hair loss, of nosebleeds, and worse. This governor's administration did not acknowledge it for 18 months. He allowed children to be poisoned for 18 months. He allowed seniors to be poisoned for 18 months. He allowed black people to be poisoned for 18 months. Poor white people to be poisoned for 18 months. Undocumented people to be poisoned for 18 months. And then, to put a bow on it, after Jen and I, in the early days of status quo, knocked on almost 500 doors last summer and fall, we found that this governor's Department of Environmental Quality cheated on the water testing for nearly 2 years. What they did was go into residents' homes, mostly poor black people who don't know what they were doing. They were just happy some officials from the state were there to test their water, and they were running the residents' water right before collecting the samples, aka flushing. Illegal. If it's a lead and copper sample meant for EPA regulatory compliance, you cannot flush the water even for 10 seconds. You have to turn on the water, put the sample bottle in right away. Because if you flush it, you're just flushing out the lead. It's called artificially lowering the lead levels. This governor's environmental department did this for 2 years, and then the governor took that data that was cooked and said, mission accomplished, the water's fine, we're shutting down the water pods. And our reporting shows, that this governor coordinated with the environmental department that cooked the numbers on how to respond to status quo. They had the same exact response, which shows coordination. This is why I met with the Attorney General of Michigan's office and the Solicitor General in February. This is what Flushing Flint, our documentary, is based on. I ain't going to jinx it, but we might have some good news on that documentary and distribution very soon. Harvard, and we're going to name names here, folks. I don't know who decided to bring on Rick Snyder at Harvard, but Rick Snyder is going to be teaching in the Taubman Center for State and Local Government. And the head of that center is a guy named Jeffrey Liebman. I don't know if it was Jeffrey Liebman who decided to bring on Rick Snyder, or I don't know if it was board members at Harvard. I don't know who it was. But they should be held accountable. Because let me tell you something. You cannot teach students, I don't care if it's at Harvard, I don't care if it's at a community school, you cannot elevate criminals and normalize criminals. Not just criminals, but racists. This is not just environmental racism. This was straight up racism, and it's fascism. The students of Harvard should not have in front of them Rick Snyder as some teacher or some mentor. It's offensive on its face. And I don't pretend to speak for the residents of Flint, but I could tell you, of all the things that I've ever tweeted, the tweet that I put out yesterday about this, I have never seen more venom on Twitter in response to something I tweeted. Not at me, at Harvard. I've never, ever seen more venom than this tweet I put out. I'm not naive. I don't think Harvard is run by people who get it. Harvard's not run by people who are on the streets with the people of Flint. This guy who runs this center probably never met somebody from Flint. But you are basically spitting on the graves of those who have died in Flint. You are basically spitting at the mothers that I've sat on porches with, who are literally 37 years old, but whose body is treating them like they're 80 years old. You are spitting on the children who are forgetting their letters in their alphabet, are forgetting numbers, are instead of calling him mama, they're calling him bava. You are spitting on the people who are taking showers today and almost fainting because the water's still screwed up. You are spitting on the people who are still getting rashes today. And this is the problem in America, and this is why I personally support Bernie Sanders. You could have great plans. Elizabeth Warren has some good plans. Okay? Tulsi, I think, has good plans. But the system in this country, political, academic, corporate, and otherwise, is rotten at its core because it's corrupt and it's rigged and it's one revolving door of sociopaths, of corporate criminals. And until you attack the system, it doesn't matter what your plans are.
Hope you enjoyed that last video. Hop on over to statuscoup.com where you can sign up for our email list and become a member for as low as $5 to $10 a month. Membership is how we grow. That's statuscoup.com/join. And remember, join our email list so we can grow the revolution with you.